Hello, everyone. This is Sherry Greenhouse, Managing Partner of Serum Exchange, and I'd like to welcome you to today's Technology Innovation Showcase and Demonstration, Improving Quality Assurance with Workflow Automation and Analytics, presented by VPI. This is going to be a very powerful demo that you're going to see today, and I'm sure you're going to have questions. We will be taking questions at the end of the presentation. If you look at your console, you'll see chat and you'll see Q&A. Q&A is where you're going to want to put your questions. So if you have some questions as we're going through the presentation or you're going through the demo, go ahead, put your questions in there, and we'll make sure we can answer as many as possible during the hour we're together today. If you find you have any technical questions, just use that chat, send it to me, Sherry Greenhouse, and I will try to help you with any technical questions you may have. If you find, for those of you listening on streaming, occasionally the streaming will stop for a few seconds. It should come right back on. You also have the option of closing your streaming and using the phone. There's a very brief survey at the end of this demo, like 3 or 4 questions. If you can fill that out, send that back to us. We greatly appreciate it. Now, I'm pleased to introduce Patrick Botts from VPI. Patrick serves as the Vice President of Workforce Optimization for VPI. Leveraging more than a decade of field experience as a contact center practitioner, he works closely with customers to capture, analyze, and improve their mission-critical customer interaction. He received his bachelor's in engineering from Arizona State, his MBA from Pepperdine University. He currently lives near Boston with his wife, 2 children, one of which was just recently born in the last few weeks. I'm also pleased to introduce Mike Hensley, who will be taking you through a live demonstration on the VPI Empower software application. Prior to joining VPI 9 years ago, he worked at Witness for 7 years as a solutions consultant. Before that, he worked in contact centers in positions ranging from frontline supervisor, mid-level management, quality assurance, and training. And right before we get started, I want to share a little bit about VPI. VPI has been providing contact center quality monitoring, analytics, performance management, and workforce optimization solutions since 1994, and they've been a Serum Exchange partner for just about a decade. The company's growth has been fueled by its ongoing innovation, outstanding customer support, and passion for continuous quality improvement. It's now my pleasure to turn the showcase over to Patrick.
Yeah, thanks so much, Sherry. Appreciate the introductions, and thank you all for joining us today. We're really looking forward to I'll be setting the stage today for Mike's demo, and looking forward to displaying our solutions and how they can help your organization. Before I get into the demo, just wanted to talk a little bit about traditional quality monitoring, what most of us are doing today in terms of quality monitoring, and see if some of this resonates with you if you have some of these same challenges, and show you a little bit about how analytics and workflow automation are helping improve the traditional QA processes that you may be more accustomed to. So this is typically what we're looking for. Like, we're looking for, and you may have seen the needle on the first slide, we're looking for a needle in a haystack, right? We're looking for the calls that really add value, and oftentimes, you know, we're hunting and pecking and kind of trying to, you know, listen for calls that are coachable with not much success, and we tend to waste a lot of time doing so. So if you look at this bell curve here, traditionally recording has been selective, and even in the transition to full-time recording, people are still randomly selecting calls for evaluation, which typically agent evaluation, it's been more focused on the agent, if you will, scoring the agent, making sure it's fair for the agent. However, there's some new analytics tools that are allowing us to really get to the left-hand side and right-hand side of this bell curve, the worst practice calls and the best practice calls that we can use to share with others for training purposes and really figuring out what's working well. And so what we're trying to find is these needles, if you will, that are located, these really high-value calls that are located on either side of the bell curve. And it's important to, in order to find those, you have to record everything, right? So if you're not already doing full-time recording, that's an important component to analytics in that you don't really know if that call is important to keep or not until it's actually taken place, right? Depending on what happens in that call, if it's a successful sale or a canceled account, or maybe it becomes a repeat interaction later on where someone calls you again for the same reason. If you don't have that call recorded, you can't really analyze it and listen to it. So it's important as a foundation to record your calls, which has become a lot less expensive to record all those calls. And then you can apply analytics to target those high-value calls, and we'll show you how that works. So these are some of the traditional challenges that are facing QA programs, and this comes from a recent benchmarking report. These are what has been most commonly reported. So do these sound familiar to you, right? Some of the things, difficulty designing evaluation criteria, maybe lack of buy-in or insufficient resources, untimely or ineffective feedback to the agents is one we hear a lot when we're asking customers about what they'd like to do better with their QA programs. Inadequate training for coaches and supervisors. Oftentimes we put our best agents and turn them into supervisors, but they may not necessarily have the skills they need to be successful in coaching and training their team of agents. So that's pretty common. And then lack of support from management, right? If it's kind of this process where we're just evaluating agents and maybe our quality score has gone up 2 points in a year, like what does that really mean, right? How does that affect customer satisfaction? What are we really getting out of our quality programs? We're putting in a lot of effort to listen to all these calls and evaluate and coach agents. What are we getting out of it? So, management really needs to see that, and I think some of the workflow automation to save time and the analytics to really find insights that you never knew before, or that were a lot more difficult to find before. Management really appreciates that. And then lack of automation was one of the other things that was commonly cited. So now we're going to get into kind of a more intelligent QA workflow. You may hear that's called targeted QA, value-driven QA, QA focused on business outcomes. There's a lot of terms that are being used, but this is a quote from Donna Floss, but really if you use analytics and workflow automation, you're going to get taken to what really matters, right? So into the business issues, the opportunities that you really need to drive the customer experience and revenue. So how does that work? It's really 4 puzzle pieces, and you'll see these 4 puzzle pieces are similar to, if you're familiar with Six Sigma or Lean Six Sigma, a lot of what we do is founded on that, those principles, of continuous improvement. So define, measure, analyze, improve, and control. So we kind of use the same approach with QA. The first thing is we got to find the needle. So how do we find the needle? As we talked about, you want to record all your communication channels, all your audio, all your calls. In addition, desktop screen video helps you find things that you didn't know before. So if you're doing screen capture now, you probably have seen some benefits during the call and after the call. Web chat and email are becoming more and more frequently used. You want to be able to analyze and evaluate those as well. More and more organizations are having multiple platforms, or maybe they're trying to consolidate to single communications platforms. It's important that the same system be able to record all those platforms. And then kind of here's where the analytics comes into play, is tagging valuable data to your recordings is key, right? So traditionally recording, you get some basic common telephony metadata that when you plug the recorder into your phone system, you get, ingoing, outgoing, agent ID, maybe, length of the call, things like that. And that's traditionally what we use in QA to try to be somewhat targeted, right? We listen for calls that were too short, or maybe calls that were too long. And if you're lucky, your recording system would give you holds and transfers, right? So maybe we listen to all calls that were on hold. for a certain amount of time, or calls that were transferred more than once, right? That's kind of already getting into that analytics-driven QA approach if you're doing that. Now there's analytics tools, and I'll show you how those work, that can pull business data from your application. So your help desk application, your CRM application, anything your agents are using to service your customers, any field that shows up on that screen can typically be pulled and tagged to your recordings or to your interactions. So things like account ID, case ID, maybe your reason codes, your disposition codes, the order value, the promise to pay amount. Any data that your agent sees, imagine you're standing behind your agent and you can't hear them, but you can see their screen. Does that data exist as they're navigating through the conversation? If it does, we can typically pull that and tag it to the call. And then it's a little bit cut off here in WebEx, but spoken phrases. If you're familiar with speech analytics, spoken word can also be, I won't call it tagged to conversations, but essentially that all becomes additional data that can be mined as well. So how does that work? You have your communication system, your telephony system, your email, your chat. From there, you can grab call metadata. We have several out-of-the-box data collectors, so almost all the major telephony systems that are out there, a lot of the different UC systems. And then speech and text analytics is, again, additional data that can be tagged to interactions. On the business data side, we typically do an API connection to your application. So if that's available, there's other methods to get the data as well, but we try to grab as much information that's valuable to you and tag that to the interaction. And there's another tool called screen analytics. So if you have an application where we can't actually pull the data from your database, then it monitors the actual fields on the screens and pulls it directly from the actual monitor. So that's called desktop screen analytics. And as you can see, it gets tagged to the actual interaction, or in this case, a call within the media player. So the account ID, the case ID, the disposition, the phone model, any notes, anything you want tagged can get tagged to that actual case or that actual interaction. So then essentially what the system does, and this is where you get into kind of the workflow automation piece of it, and Mike will get into a lot more of that when he shows you the demo here in a minute. It takes the recorded files, the call audio recordings, the screen video, and it takes data that we're capturing related to those conversations or those communications from the telephony system, the business apps, from speech categorizations if you're kind of categorizing calls. So for an example, maybe from the business system, from the CRM system we know that it's a canceled account. Someone canceled their account. To add a speech category to it, you may have one or two speech categories. One of those categories could be that there was a kind of a negative tone of voice, right? So we can tag that as well. And then maybe we also want to tag a category where someone said they requested an escalation. So we have now a bucket, you know, if we're focusing here on the right-hand side on customer retention, someone canceled accounts where someone requested an escalation and there was a negative tone of voice. So that's just one example of how the system kind of classifies calls into buckets. You choose the buckets that you care about. If you're interested in improving first contact resolution, which a lot of organizations have a big initiative now for that, we're working very closely on, is looking for all repeat calls, right? So did the caller call in for the same reason? So caller ID, account ID, customer ID for the same reason within 7 days or 30 days. You define that. And that gets bucketed into your bucket of repeat calls. In our system, you're going to see in the demo that it actually looks like flags versus buckets, but you can flag calls and interactions different colors to create your, quote, buckets, if you will. On the bottom there, ensuring compliance is a big one. So we can automatically identify if there's credit card information that needs to be blocked out or masked out of the screen video and muted out of the audio for PCI compliance, or maybe there's sensitive patient information that we need to block out for HIPAA information. That's kind of how that works as well. And then what happens is those calls, once they're bucketed, they get automatically assigned. So you decide which types of calls you want sent off for evaluation. The business rules do their work, and you get each evaluator, whether it's your analyst, if you have analysts, or maybe a combination of analysts and supervisors or just supervisors, they get their own to-do list, and it shows them why the actual call was tagged. In this case, you can see it's highlighted, no sale call was tagged. They actually get a sales QA form. You may just have one QA form you use for all calls, but many organizations are now moving towards more where they have different QA forms for different type of calls to gather different information about maybe why sales aren't being as successful or how can we better upsell, things of that nature. And then taking action is key, because you can do all the analytics in the world, and I'm talking to dozens of organizations that have analytics, and they have kind of a separate department for analytics, and they do tons and tons of evaluating of all their communications and figuring out what needs to improve, but they don't do a really good job of driving the behavior down to the front line and actually making change. So we've made that easy. We allow the ability in your QA forms to add an action to the QA form. So while you're creating your question, you could say, all right, I want to automatically send coaching if it falls below an 8 out of 10 on this question, and it's going to send coaching to only those agents that fall behind. Or maybe it's just a message or a reminder saying, hey, you forgot to mention our automatic billing that's available on the website, or whatever it may be. And you can also message supervisors through those automated actions. And then measuring is kind of the final piece of the puzzle, if you will. So we have a variety of ways between, agent and team and department scorecards to trending reports to tickers. These tickers are really popular. You can pull in basically all that data that we were talking about that you can capture. You can pull those into the actual tickers and scorecards and kind of add them here. So you may want to have QA next to CSAT or next to sales, and show that you can pick whatever you want your agents to see, your supervisors. You can show them versus their goal, versus their group, however you want to configure it. These are real-time tickers, and you can see there's a message in this one, expect higher call volumes at 2:30 due to a TV promotion. You can send messages instantly, or again through rules like in the QA form, or maybe there's a rule on a metric that triggers a message, just a reminder. And we have a lot of other different reports, but I won't get into that too much. I'll let Mike show you. And basically the business impact of this continuous improvement cycle, call it a more intelligent quality cycle, if you will. Better operational effectiveness, more timely and more effective feedback to the agent. You're going to have better business outcomes because you're finding out things that you never knew before. Customer satisfaction, obviously, because your quality is going to improve. And then it's really a foundation for continuous improvement. So this cycle begins. You don't stop once you've solved one issue, you go on to the next issue and so forth. So with that said, I appreciate your time. I'd like to turn it over to Mike now, who will actually dive into the application and show you how it works.
I just wanted to clarify a couple of things as well. I know that Patrick just went through quite a lot of information pretty quickly to try to help set the stage for what I'm about to show you. One thing that we're not suggesting is that you abandon your traditional quality monitoring processes. Obviously, within our application, you can still do a lot of the same things that you're accustomed to doing or have been accustomed to doing historically, like randomly selecting calls for quality monitoring purposes. We understand that that's a key goal for most call centers. What we are suggesting, though, is that in that process, we get you to the good stuff faster. We try to get you to the recordings that are good calls in an automated fashion and get those calls in front of the right people who can do something with them, who can deliver feedback, the right kind of feedback in a timely manner. And we know that even in that kind of legacy process, that's not easy. So you can still do all of those things within our application, but as people implement more and more automated workflows through our application, what we've found is that it typically frees up more time to dig into even more interesting things so that you can become more prescriptive with the types of issues you're trying to resolve, the type of metrics that you're trying to move downfield, et cetera. And that's where analytics really come into play in a big way, because everybody has a little bit different definition of a, quote, good call, of a high-value call. Everybody has a little bit different definition of what's important to them or most important to that particular individual. So our goal is to try to automate some of the laborious tasks involved with finding that proverbial needle in the haystack so that you don't have to do it, so that your users don't have to do that. I'm going to come back to this page. I've just logged into our primary user interface that we call vPortal. Whenever I log in, the system knows who I am. It knows what kinds of things I'm interested in, what kind of metrics I want to look at, what kind of recordings I'm interested in reviewing and evaluating. And it knows that based upon a profile that was originally created for me, but that since then I have tweaked to make my own. So whenever I log in to vPortal, I'm initially brought to our primary landing page, and you can see some of the types of metrics that I'm looking at on a daily basis. These are all metrics that I've defined, told the system that I want to see, keep an eye on a regular basis. These are all metrics that are coming from a variety of different places, some that we generate internal to our application, some metrics that we pull from other business systems or the telephony platform, et cetera. But at the end of the day, each user has control over what their user experience is like within vPortal. And like I said, I'm going to come back to this page in a second. I wanted to start with more of a common, traditional quality monitoring task that I'm sure everybody on the call today is familiar with, and that's starting to find that needle in the haystack, searching for and replaying interactions. So typically, whenever as a quality analyst or a frontline supervisor, whether I'm performing a quality monitoring evaluation or whether I'm just searching for a call for liability purposes, the first thing that we're all accustomed to doing is going in and defining some kind of search criteria to pull out the call or calls that I'm interested in. So in that regard, VPI has really tried to make it easier to get you to the good stuff faster, meaning get you to those recordings that you're interested in faster. So we allow each user to define things like default search results so that when I come into our search and replay tool, I don't have to define search criteria. It knows what I want to see whenever I initially hit this page, and it can give me a list of search results right out of the gate, where I have at the top of my screen here a list of recordings. Each one of these rows represents a recording, and if I select one of them, that recording shows up in my media player down at the bottom, and we show you kind of a graphic depiction of the recording, kind of like an iPod, and I'll get into that in a little more detail in a second. But then getting to the good stuff faster, and this is where collecting information, collecting data comes into play, becomes a critical piece of this puzzle. Because typically what we've seen, like Patrick said, historically speaking, most folks that were doing recording typically would have a lot of telephony-style data associated to each call. Things like, how long was the call? When did it take place? What date and time? What agent handled the call? What was the caller ID associated to it? What 800 number did it come in on? And while these are good metrics, they're very telephony-centric, right? So I may be able to use some of those metrics to find the call that I'm interested in. Sometimes it's as simple as show me all the calls that Johnny Agent took yesterday between 3 and 4, and I can sit and listen to calls and hopefully find the one that I'm interested in. What we found, though, is that the more data that we associate to the recordings, the quicker we can help you find the one that you're interested in. So one example that I like to use is customer ID. If we know, for example, the customer ID the ID of the customer for every single recording that we're recording or every call that we're recording. And I want to go back and find, for example, all of the calls where customer ID 123456 called into our call center recently. I can key that into what we call a hyperfilter, and the system will take me to a list of just those interactions, where again, now I can see where this particular customer, based on the client ID, not a caller ID, but their actual customer ID, where they called in and spoke on the same day to a couple of different agents. That may be interesting for me if I'm looking for first call resolution issues, right? It may be helpful to me if I'm just trying to locate a call for a particular customer so that I can get a better sense of the history of their call over some given period of time. So any of the pieces of data, any of the metadata that we are collecting and associating to calls can be used as search criteria and can help you filter through and find the specific recordings that you're looking for faster. Now, we also allow you to do more of a traditional searching where you can define different search criteria. I can create new, modify, and save specific searches, and those can be very simple, like kind of the legacy kind of things we were talking about. Just give me a random sampling of recordings for my team members within the last 2 days. Show me all of the calls that came in on this 800 number. But now that we have additional metadata, we can get a lot more prescriptive. I can say things like, show me all of the calls that resulted in a new order being placed for product A that resulted in a sale of over $400. You can now do more advanced searching, and you can save those searches. So we find that customers typically will tend to repeat some of that searching capability. Well, you can save those so that you can have one-click access back into buckets of calls that you're interested in. And this is really where the buckets come into play. So we can categorize these calls so that you can have different buckets that you've got one-click access into to see all of the calls that meet those specific criteria. Now, once we do that, and I'm going to dig a little bit more into the recordings before we go to the next phase, but when we're doing that, we're tracking not only additional information about a call, but we're able to track when specific things happen within a call. And that, when you're talking about PCI compliance, HIPAA compliance, et cetera, that really becomes an important piece of this puzzle as well. For example, if I know by looking at my media player here that the green bar represents audio recording, and I can see when people were speaking, and I can see when they were silent, and that the blue bar represents video recording, where we've recorded and synchronized screen activity to that call. And by the way, I've got a screen or a thumbnail of my video recording over here on the right that when I start playing this back will come active, and then I can resize and make full screen or push over onto another monitor and see everything that the agent was doing while they were handling this call. And I can tell other basic pieces of information about the call, like Jessica Rubenstein is the particular agent that handled this call. I can see when she picked it up, when she hung up, etc. But more interestingly, because we're not only tracking extra metadata about these recordings, but able to track events when interesting things happened within the call, I can see, for example, at this point in the call, Jessica started processing a new order. And at this part of the call, shortly after she hung up, she finalized that order. So back to PCI compliance. And by the way, I know that that was an order because I know that a green bar represents a new order, and we've got legends to help you remember all of that. But coming back to PCI compliance, HIPAA compliance, in those scenarios, the type of events that we look for are events that tell us when your agents start dealing with sensitive data and when they stop dealing with sensitive data, so that we can either mute and mask or completely scrub and destroy the recording between those two event markers and thereby keeping you PCI compliant. In those scenarios, if I don't have authority to see sensitive data, I can still see the non-sensitive portions of the call, but any sensitive portions of the call wouldn't be available to me. I wouldn't be able to hear the audio or see any video recording associated to them. Now, this is just one example of what we do with this extra data that we're collecting. Another reason that it becomes so important is because that data then floods all of our application suite, and we use it throughout the applications to start automating workflows. So, for example, one thing that folks like to do with that type of data is stitch recordings back together. So I'm sure all of you at some point have gone through and tried to find recordings that were transferred from one agent to another. You no longer have to do that in VPI. We can automatically stitch those call segments back together for you based on the extra intelligence that we're gathering from the telephony system, so that you can see in one single entity when Jessica, in this example, picked up the phone, spoke for a few minutes, and then transferred it over to Greg, who completed the call. So we can stitch back together call transfers, etc., conferences, etc., so that you can get a true customer experience view into your recorded interactions. We can also assemble interactions in a way that allow you to take a closer look at first call resolution. So, for example, based on business rules that you create, you have the ability to tell the system to stitch back together recordings that were from the same customer over some given period of time. So, for example, customer ID 123456 called in 2 or 3 different times. Over the course of the last 3 months, let's automatically stitch those recordings together and show them on a single timeline like this, where I have one interaction or one entity to look at, one item in my search results that show me the 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 calls, however many calls that particular individual placed, maybe related to the same ticket, incident number, or issue. So we call that interaction assembly, and we use this information, this extra information that we're collecting, this extra data that we're collecting to assemble automatically these interactions so that you don't have to go searching for them. And that's another thing that we do with the data. Where we start talking about automating your quality workflow, though, if you think for a moment now about all of the different types of data that we can gather and associate to recordings, it gives us a unique opportunity from a quality perspective to automatically go find the good calls, right? So when Patrick was talking about finding the needle in the haystack on either side of that bell curve, how do I find the best case examples and the worst case examples so that I can use the good for training and use it to train the bad? We allow you to create business rules that will automatically select calls that need to be inspected, and we will automatically assign those recordings, again, based on the business rule, to users that you specify who are most competent to deal with that type of task. In other words, we can create evaluation tasks. So from a user perspective, my quality workflow goes from search for a call, search for a call, search for a call, find a call, evaluate the call, to a more automated, immediate activity, right? So specifically, if I were to show you our typical quality workflow, I would log into vPortal as a supervisor or a QA analyst, whatever the case may be. I can have an evaluation task list. These are each recordings for individuals that the system has retrieved based on business roles that I've created or that my management have created, so that I no longer have to go searching for a call at all. I just know that every day when I come to work, I need to inspect these recordings. And you can see some of these recordings are from individuals. These may be my team members, things of that nature. Some of these are calibration sessions that I need to conduct to make sure that I'm evaluating calls the same way as my peers are. And we'll get into calibration in a little bit more detail in a second. So at this point, my whole workflow just becomes go to the top of the list and click. The system will go out and automatically retrieve the recording that was selected for me. It will open up not only the media so that I can hear the call, see what happened on the workstation, but it will also open up the specific evaluation form that I should use to inspect this particular type of call. Now, having said that, I'm going to close the media and just dock it up here out of the way so I can chat about the evaluation form a bit. When it comes to evaluation forms, VPI has tried to adhere to the KISS method of development. So we've really gone to great lengths to allow our end users to create and maintain evaluation forms on the business side of the house. So, so that when a new form needs to be created or changes need to be made to a specific evaluation form, the end users don't have to go back to the IT department to make those happen. But we have a form generation tool that I'll show you in a second that allows you to create evaluation forms that are as simple or as sophisticated as you'd like for them to be. Typically, that entails having unique questions. So you ask the questions that are important to you so that you're inspecting the things that are important to you. Having custom answering schemes, yes, no, not applicable, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, good, better, best, whatever is appropriate for you. And custom scoring schemes so that a yes answer on one question may be worth more than a yes answer on some other question. So custom scoring schemes, custom answering schemes, custom questions, and then giving you the ability to lay those questions out in a way that meet your call flow or that match your call flow so that people can get through them quickly while listening to a call or monitoring an interaction. Excuse me. While still being able to associate each question back to a specific skill set. So you'll notice that each question has been color-coded. What those colors equate to, if you look at my scorecard for this evaluation, are different skill sets. So I can see that red questions are associated to listening skills, green questions are associated to empathy skills, so on and so forth. So that as I go through and simply answer these questions, the system will automatically score and show me how I'm scoring this particular agent, not only by skill set, but it rolls that information up by page, and you can have as many different pages in the evaluation form as you like, and also at an overall score. So completely customizable evaluation forms. While we're here, I wanted to take a minute to just show you our form designer because I do think that it's important to have a form generation tool that the non-technical end user can use easily. So I'm actually going to go into our form designer, and I'm going to select a particular form that I want to modify. Obviously, I've already gone in here ahead of time and created an evaluation form. And in this case, I'm just going to make some changes to it. Specifically, there's an item over here on the Selling Skills tab that I want to change. And if I want to do that, for example, here I've got, did the agent upsell a customer to new software upgrade? I actually want to change the text of that a little bit because we're running a new campaign in my fictitious contact center related to a Wi-Fi offering. So did the agent upsell the customer to the new Wi-Fi offering? So here I'm just typing in the question. You can see where I have selected different methods for answering this question, whether I want it to be control box, just text, what I want the drop-down options to be, etc. I say OK, and now I've got an updated question here specific to the Wi-Fi offering. I'm going to move that to the top of my evaluation form. Single click, kind of simple, what you see is what you get kind of editing. So literally, even when we're creating evaluation forms, users are prompted for all of this information. What question do you want to ask? What skill set do you want it to be associated to? How do you want this question to be answered? What score should be associated to each one of those answer options? Where our evaluation forms get interesting, not only are they simple to use, but you can create evaluation forms that will automatically take action for you, again, further automating your workflow. So for example, I can make the evaluation form take action if anybody fails this highly critical component of the inspection process. We do that by just adding action. The system will essentially ask me what action I want to take. So in this case, I'm going to say our goal is to always have a yes here. If I fall out of goal, what action do I want to take? I may just want to say send an email to the marketing department letting them know that we're not upselling as much as we could. I may send a text message, or more interestingly, perform coaching. So I know that I've got a little coaching module that I created and loaded into our coaching tool to help people properly upsell the new Wi-Fi offering. I can tell the system if anybody fails to do that, automatically send them that training module. And now I have a triggering action set up to automatically send upselling Wi-Fi anytime folks fail to do that. And I can set different parameters around that, right? I can have business rules that dictate not only from the quality form, but I can have business rules that dictate when people get what training. And that can be based on not only any quality metric that I have, but any of the other metrics that we're tracking as well. Now, what does that look like? I'm going to kind of shift. That's kind of our form generation tool, pretty simple to use. From an agent's perspective, what does all of this look like? So there's a couple of different ways that we, excuse me, that we will typically start communicating with our agents. So while we want we would say maintain the personal one-on-one relationship with the agent. We don't want to completely replace it, but we want to try to get them effective feedback faster when it's appropriate. So one way that we do that are through what we call tickers. And I like to liken these tickers literally to ESPN tickers, where you're watching sports scores, or stock tickers. Tickers can be run on a workstation, whether it's an agent workstation, a supervisor workstation, a manager workstation. In this case, I'm actually showing you an agent ticker, where Mike Fritz is my fictitious call center agent. Tickers can be customized, so they can look whatever you want them to look like. They can contain whatever metrics you want them to contain. Excuse me. And those metrics can then be communicated in real time, or historically, or any combination of the above, to those individual users. So in this case, as an agent in the contact center, I'm seeing my average QA scores, how many coaching sessions I've completed, what my total order value is this quarter so far, how many orders I've actually taken this quarter so far. So again, these are metrics that matter to me. You ultimately have control over what metrics are displayed to agents. One of those metrics can notify them when they have new coaching assigned to them. So let's say that we're now recording we're recording 100% of our interactions. We're collecting additional metadata about the recordings so that we can do our typical random selection of quality inspections. And taking that a step further, we're now being more prescriptive about what we're evaluating. So we're always finding the needles in the haystack and evaluating those specific interactions. And we're scoring them using our custom evaluation forms that we've created. The evaluation forms can assign coaching like I mentioned, or those can be based on other metrics, so that when an agent is notified that they have new training, they can come into their coaching homepage and they can see that because I failed to upsell properly per my QA evaluations, I was automatically assigned that new upselling Wi-Fi offering coaching module. So in this case, in this regard, from a coaching perspective, we become the intelligent delivery mechanism for figuring out who needs what training and automatically assigning that training or coaching to them. What we have tried to do is to be very generic in terms of what kind of training we can deliver, meaning the training content that you deliver may be something as simple as things that you already have, like Word documents, PDFs for policies and procedures, PowerPoints, recordings. If you find a good needle in the haystack, you may want to use it to train some of your bad needles in the haystack, right? And you can deliver that kind of content through our coaching tool, up to and including anything as sophisticated as SCORM-based or SCORM-compliant computer-based training modules. So if you use applications like Adobe Captivate to create training modules, we can deliver those up to agents, and again, in a very prescriptive and automated way. So in this regard, we're automating the process of finding the needle in the haystack. We're getting the needle to the right person so that they're inspecting the right calls, they're evaluating the right calls, they're being notified when things are happening, all based on business rules that you create and maintain. And now we start talking about measuring, right? How do you measure success and see where you need to move the ball downfield or how to move the ball downfield? So strictly from a quality perspective, there were a couple of things that I promised to show you earlier. I'm going to start with what we call instant analyzers. So instant analyzers are designed to do something pretty specific. We found that when you start talking about analysis of data with people, the conversations typically get very complex, very fast. You get a lot of glazed over looks in your eyes, and you realize that that the term means something different to everybody, right? So what we've tried to do is to create a very easy-to-use analysis tool that the common end user, be it a supervisor, a manager, or even operations folks, can get to the types of metrics that we're collecting and figure out very quickly what needs to change, who it needs to change for, and what should happen next. So what instant analyzers do, they take all of this data that we're collecting and try to put it into a very simple, easy to consume view, right? So for example, when I go into the evaluation instant analyzer, the first thing it shows me is just a snapshot of performance so that I can see month to month how my group is doing, or how my groups in this case are doing, compared to goal. And you can see compared to my 85% goal, sometimes we exceed it, sometimes we don't quite meet it, but in general terms, it looks like we're doing all right. And as with analytics, sometimes the devil is in the detail, so we always, let you drill down further to get to some of the details. For example, I just clicked on a group view so that I can look at all of the groups that comprise that snapshot view that I was looking at prior. Now, while I can continue to drill down at an overall from an overall score perspective if I want, what we found is interesting is when you really start peeling the onion and looking at details. Like, for example, while here I'm looking at the average evaluation score trend, and that looks all fairly respectable. If I start looking on a question-by-question basis, I may find that not to be the case. So again, here I'm showing for every question in this particular evaluation form over this given date time frame, I'm looking at how people scored on individual questions. Again, the devil's in the details, right? So in this case, while Brian's team scores month to month looked okay, I actually see that he's having an issue with this particular question, which is offering appropriate IVR online solution as option for future service. So again, this is another key thing for my fictitious call center. We're trying to push people to self-service, and I see that Brian's team is not really being very successful with that. So the next question that pops to mind, what about everybody else? Well, I've got all of their metrics at hand here as well, so I can see all of those different groups. and I can very quickly see that something is definitely going on here with that particular item or that particular issue. I now know where to focus my time. And I can start to ask more intelligent questions, right? More interesting questions like, why is that? I notice here that it's not just Brian's team, but it's something that's unique to this entire group, supervisor by supervisor. Do I have a calibration issue? Do I have a training issue? What is the case, right? So this essentially allows me to continue to drill down. I can look team by team, question by question, and see how folks are doing on that particular metric in my inspection form. And it looks in this case like I may have a calibration issue because I can't imagine everybody performing so poorly. So this is kind of the concept of instant analyzers for evaluation data, quality scores. Since I mentioned it, I'm going to hop over and stay on this particular track and look at calibration. Let's try to stay focused on this particular issue, see if we actually have a calibration issue or if it's just a problem with training. So from a calibration perspective, we allow management to create calibration sessions. And a calibration session is essentially an assignment of a particular evaluation session, so that we can look at how we're standardizing our answers and responses. And again, I have the same type of drill down functionality where I can drill down to a very detailed level very quickly and find out where I need to recalibrate individual evaluators compared to my standard deviation for each particular question on an evaluation form. And then coming full circle, we've talked about a lot of different metrics, statistics that may be important for you to track, and that brings us back full circle to our primary landing page, because as we're tracking all these different metrics, obviously we want to keep an eye on them. Many people like to view those metrics in more of a graphic nature instead of, a standard report from a standard reporting perspective. So we allow users to define what metrics they're interested in, again, so that they can monitor, keep an eye on, and hopefully move those metrics appropriately. So guys, I know I'm running short on time. I wanted to make sure that we had some time for questions and answers, so I'm going to open it back up for questions and turn it back over to Patrick.
Yeah, thanks so much. So it looks like we have, Sarah, do you want to, field the questions, and then we can kind of see there's several questions.
Yeah, there are. There are a bunch of questions that came in, so let's just go to those questions. Here we go. Once the coaching assignment has been sent, is there a report to see who actually did the training? Is it time to make sure the agent just doesn't click start and finish?
Excellent question, and yes, there are. Obviously, for the sake of time, I didn't have time to run you through every single report nor even every single view of this data that we have, but we certainly track when agents took training, what agents took training, how long they spent doing it, and even in regard to SCORM compliant training sessions, we can actually track scores and things of that nature and allow you to report upon all of that. Those actually become additional metrics that you can roll back into our process and look at in any of our other views as well. So not only from a reporting perspective, but also on our dashboards, our tickers, etc.
Okay, and just remember that you can put your questions in the Q&A section. Okay, let's see. The customer ID is assigned based on the phone number and the phone number the customer is calling in from. Is that correct?
Actually, it's not. It could be if you wanted it to be, but what we found is that's not terribly accurate. Like everybody nowadays, most folks have multiple phone numbers. I might be calling in from one of my, my office phone, my work, my home phone, or my mobile phone. So we found that tracking customer identification through caller ID is not terribly accurate. What we do instead is actually look to the source. So wherever you track those customer IDs, for example, in a CRM application, in a sales database, wherever you're tracking your customer IDs, we would actually go to the source for that data and pull it in to make sure that we knew, regardless of what phone they were dialing in from, what caller ID they were using, we had the right customer ID associated to each recording for you.
Okay, good. Patrick, there's a bunch of ROI questions, savings that they can expect using analytics. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So typically just in workflow alone, when we monitor our customer savings, it's typically the time it takes to actually evaluate calls is anywhere between 40 to 80% less than what they were used to. Then there's also a big ROI with more timely feedback to the agents. So the real-time tickers, immediate feedback of the evaluations, more immediate coaching, if you will. We've seen companies just when they put the ticker up without even doing anything else, even without even adjusting, their QA process or anything, before they even do that, decrease wrap time by as much as 50% and handle time by as much as 20-25% without even doing anything. I've seen sales go up 3% overall without even doing anything. So it's amazing if you just empower the agents with kind of immediate feedback, especially if you have at-home agents. It's a really fantastic tool because there are no wall boards right at home. So there's some really big ROI, and then the biggest ROI is if you actually get into the details and you start tracking things like first contact resolution, and you start improving that. Like a 1% increase in first contact resolution typically results in a 1% improvement in customer satisfaction. So if you're able to track either your customer satisfaction metrics, what is 1% in CSAT or Net Promoter Score? How does that relate to in terms of loyalty and revenue to your company? If you can move the needle of FCR, which, out of the box, we allow you to track FCR if you're capturing, customer ID and reason code and things of that nature. If you can move it by 1 or 2 points, it's in some organizations it can be millions and millions of dollars. So in terms of added revenue.
Okay, good. Thank you. Mike, what about hiding sensitive information? Can you do that on the tool?
Absolutely, we hide sensitive information, and we actually take a little different tack there than some of the other tools on the market. When you're talking about PCI and HIPAA compliance, especially PCI compliance, the regulation has changed, and I'm sure will continue to do so over time. It used to be enough for most folks to just mute and mask sensitive information, meaning if you knew when an agent was dealing with sensitive information, when they started dealing with sensitive information, and when they stopped dealing with sensitive information, to just simply mute and mute the audio, mask the video between those two begin and end events, right? Beginning of this year, the PCI rec changed to say, that you should scrub those instead, that they shouldn't, no part of that should be retained. So between that begin and end event within the call, that you were not allowed to store any of that data, right? So you have to scrub it completely, destroy it so that it doesn't exist. But what we get into in those situations are, we typically see that people a lot of companies have conflicting requirements there. We'll have one regulation like PCI telling them to scrub the call, to destroy it or parts of it, where they may have another government regulation that says that they have to keep it. So we've taken the tack that we put that in the hands of each customer and allow them to decide, and we do either or both, right? So we actually can mute and mask if a customer chooses that's the way they want to go, or we can actually scrub the call, destroy the sensitive portions of the call. But we do that based on those events. And those events come from we have a variety of different tools, mechanisms, technical mechanisms that we can use to get those events that range from simple API pushes that let us know when people start and stop dealing with sensitive data, to database dips into systems like point-of-sale systems and things of that nature that tell us when they started and when they stopped processing orders, credit cards, et cetera. So we have a variety of technical mechanisms that we can use to enable that entire process, whichever way the customer chooses to go.
Okay, great. We're at the top of the hour, so even though there's some great questions, we'll make sure that Patrick and Mike get those questions. They can answer you directly. We just have simply run out of time. Patrick, can we just take 30 seconds, wrap up some of the most important things you'd like everybody to remember?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. And thanks so much all for your time on behalf of all of us here at VPI. Really looking forward to the opportunity to further engage with you and maybe find a little bit out more about your business and your challenges and see if we can apply our tools to your specific challenges to help you solve your needs. I think you'll really benefit from not only the workflow automation, but finding out things that are important to your customers and growing your business. So I really look forward to working with you, and thanks so much for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Patrick. Thank you, Mike. To contact Patrick or Mike, or both, their contact information is right on the screen in front of you. Also, you may want to go look at their website, www.vpi-core.com, and we will make sure everybody does receive a copy of the recording, a link to the recording, so you can go ahead and listen to this. There was a lot of information, a lot to go through. You may want to revisit some of that information, and we certainly encourage you to do so. And again, if your questions were not answered, we'll make sure that Patrick and Mike get to you directly. So thank you to VPI for presenting this technology showcase, and thank you to everyone that has spent their hour with us today. Have a great rest of your afternoon. Thank you.
Thanks, and have a great weekend.